This lesson relates to organizing your cards, your detail cards, in preparation for drafting your essay. This is related to kind of outlining and revising as you shift around and make final determinations of the order of your paper. So we are going to do this process directly on our electronic note cards, but I want to show you a copy of what a much more in-depth outline might look like if we had 60 cards. This is an outline, a rough outline of a student. It starts in this represents the first big topic word. So as you can see, this person has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 large groups. Your goal was to have at least like 4 to 6 large groups. You can see the topic here is that animal therapy makes it easier for the therapist. Now, this is where it gets a little different from our research paper since the amount of cards we have has been decreased. This person then makes subcategories for all of their cards. So these numbers would represent how many cards they had filed under this entire large group or your big word. They then created some organization within those cards to help your audience make sense of all of these cards clumped together. So this is what a handwritten outline would look like in reference to a paper that had upwards towards 70 or so cards. I'm going to show you how we're going to implement this strategy with what we've already done with our big words and how to start organizing our cards within. The goal is to consider the order that you presented these big cards. So some of you I commented on where you wouldn't necessarily start with education and schooling before you would talk about causes of the disease. So the organization of these large words needs to be considered in addition to the organization of your detail cards. Now we're going to simply organize these cards into order that we want to write them in our paper. If we simply did not consider the meaning or the detail on the card and we just started typing every single card in our paper, it would be disorganized, unclear, and hard to follow. So we had pulled cards into each of these groups, and now it's time to just focus on one small group and consider the organization from within. If you had 2 cards under the causes group that was related to genetics, you might consider moving both of those related cards next to each other. So I might have causes, and these first 2 represent similar ideas with which are genetics. I then might have a card in isolation that has to do with pesticides, perhaps, and then maybe my final 2 cards are also related in something the mother carries. I'm not sure. That way, when we write our cards out, we keep like information together and move through the cards in an orderly fashion. For behaviors, you will do the same thing in every single group. So read the card, decide if there's any other cards like it, link it together, and then determine the order of those details within the big topic. This card, behaviors, if you read here that they have extremely outrageous temper tantrums and they are uncontrollable and are violent, and then this next card said that they have repetitive actions or repeat themselves when they communicate, you would probably want to switch these cards. You don't usually start with the first most dramatic, intense first. You use logic to build towards something. If this card was about potential arguments with siblings, I might move that in between. We have repetitive behaviors that can escalate to argument with siblings, which can ultimately lead to violent behavior. That is a clear progression of cards. If I had this card that was, again, about making unnecessary noises, I might move that all the way to the top next to my card that talks about the repetitiveness in language. Then, when I write this section of my paper out, I have a clear sequence of ideas that would make sense to my reader. Instead of starting at Violent, aggressive behavior, well, they kind of make noises and sometimes they fight, but they have to be restrained. It would be a very back and forth, unorganized representation of your cards. You will do the same thing for effects on schooling. Look at every single card, determine what makes sense in what order. Now, if you were working on a much larger, longer paper, in order to keep this organization clear, you might insert cards within each group to help provide that organization as you move through a larger number of cards. For the purpose of this assignment, under these circumstances, we are simply going to focus on the large word and organize these within just by moving them, but not adding another potentially subtopic or a way to organize these cards. If it is difficult to move large groups entirely, then jot down a handwritten outline that you want to do causes first, you want to do behaviors, you want to do effects on schooling. That will prevent you. Some of you need to pull entire topics from the bottom, like this whole topic needs to be moved to the top, and that might be difficult to do with moving the cards. So if you don't want to actually move it in this form of an electronic outline and you want to write it on a separate sheet of paper, you may do that. The goal of this assignment is to consider order of large ideas in addition to order of details presented. Simply move the cards in your outline to be prepared for the drafting of our next assignment. Good luck.